2829 Abandoned ship. The familiar lobby of the government compound was uncharacteristically empty, except for the corpses. The walls were cracked and riddled with holes. The furniture was destroyed. The floor and the ceiling were splattered with blood. Jet regarded the scene of devastation with a distant expression. It seemed like there had been a firefight here recently. Mundane soldiers had clashed with each other at first, and were then wiped out by the Awakened. The battle had moved on deeper into the building since then. Judging by the sounds and the mild tremors running through the floor, only sporadic skirmishes were still happening on the upper floors of the compound, while most of the violence was happening underground. In all the years since its establishment, the government complex in NQSC had never been breached, yet now, it seemed to have fallen. However, the compound had not been attacked from outside. The scene of the lobby told Jet that much: it had been compromised from within. The thralls of Astarion who had been hidden among the government personnel must have finally turned on those of their comrades who still remained loyal to the human domain. The Dreamspawn was tired of waiting and had the means to take control, since most of humanity had already fallen to his plague, so, he gave his servants a command to finish the job forcefully. Frowning in displeasure, Jet made her way into the depths of the compound. She grimaced as she walked, the pain of her burns radiating across her body like heat. Her wounds were painful, but not life-threatening. Even if they were, Jet was not quite alive, so they would not have threatened her existence. Still, she wished that Nephis would heal them. Already, sadly, Nephis could not heal every minor scrape. If she did, she would have been overcome by an endless, relentless agony. So, Jet had to endure the pain until her transcendent body naturally repaired itself in a few days. Cursing quietly, she made her way forward. The emergency systems of the complex had been shut down, so the elevators weren't working. The stairwells had become strategic avenues for control over the building. Most of them were in the hands of the turncoats, who were besieging the few underground levels where the remaining loyalists had barricaded themselves. Jet wanted to help, but knew that revealing herself would only bring death and destruction upon them. So, she simply passed through the closed doors of an elevator and drifted down its dark shaft as a wraith. The deeper she went, the louder the sounds of the battle were. Eventually, she exited the shaft on one of the deepest levels of the government complex. The turncoats seemed to have retreated from here temporarily, leaving behind dozens of corpses. Each of the dead men had been killed by one precise shot that struck the weak points of their armor with eerie precision. The floor was slick with blood. Jet coalesced into a human and studied the corpses with a dispassionate expression. Then, sensing an intense gaze, she looked into the depths of the long corridor. "Do you think your bullets can harm me?" A woman of unassuming appearance revealed herself from the shadows, lowering a combat rifle. She was wearing a dark suit of enchanted combat armor, and her cold gaze was both piercing and calm. The woman regarded Jet for a moment, then bowed slightly. "Saint Jet, I am Awakened Kim. We've been told to expect you." Jet headed toward Awakened Kim with measured steps. "I take it the evacuation is not going well." The woman shook her head. "Everything is on schedule. You are the last one to arrive, though, so we must hurry. Follow me, please." Together, they left the bloodied corridor behind and proceeded to the doors of a massive cargo elevator. The doors had been locked, but the seal was broken, as were the doors themselves. Something immensely powerful seemed to have torn them apart. A pair of winches had been installed at the mouth of the vertical shaft, steel cables falling into the darkness. Awakened Kim proficiently strapped herself to a descender, slung the rifle to her back, and began to rappel down without saying anything. Jet simply turned into a wraith and followed her by levitating in the air. The shaft was quite long. As they descended into the depths of the earth, Jet asked in an ethereal, echoing voice, "Are members of the Shadow Clan not susceptible to the plague?" Awakened Kim glanced at her briefly. "We are, even if our resistance to it is quite high. After all, each of us knows our sovereign personally, unlike the subjects of the Longing Domain, for most of whom Lady Nephis is merely an abstract symbol. Still, we did lose a few agents to the Hunger Domain, already. It's just that identifying them is far easier for us." She stopped for a moment to catch her breath and nodded to her forearm, where a small sliver of a serpent tattoo was visible between the edge of her vambrace and the lip of her black glove. "The mark of shadows rejects them. It's hard to miss." Jet smiled. A method like that did not guarantee absolute safety, but the Shadow Clan was indeed more immune to the plague than anyone else in the world. Better yet, their lands were separated from the rest of the human domain by the Hollow Mountains. There were currently only 3 ways to reach the Forgotten Shore. One was to cross the Hollow Mountains. Even if Astarion was capable of doing that, it would take him a considerable amount of time. The second was to be carried across the realm boundary by Dark Dancer Revel, who had been marked by the Lord of Shadows. And the third way. Just then, they reached the bottom of the immensely long elevator shaft. In front of them was a vast underground chamber, so tall that its ceiling could barely be seen far above. And in the center of that chamber, a black rift towered like a wound in the fabric of the world. The Dream Gate of the Lord of Shadows. One of the 7 gates he could open, and the only one he had left behind for his servants to use. Detaching herself from the descender harness, awakened Kim looked at her watch. We still have 13 minutes left. Everyone, hurry, we depart in 10. There were other people in the chamber, clad in suits of armor similar to hers. They were currently busy loading supply crates and various equipment on primitive alloy wagons, ready to push them into the gate. There was someone else in the chamber, as well, someone Jet had not expected to see. Or rather, something else. A dreadful black steed was standing beside the Dream Gate, watching the entrance to the shaft with his frightening crimson eyes. There was something different about him today, though. As Jet studied the terror, she noticed a familiar iron locket hanging on a black leather cord around his neck. She raised an eyebrow. What's that horse doing here? Awakened Kim looked at the black stallion respectfully. Lord Nightmare just showed up. Jet hesitated for a few moments, then decided to move on and asked a different question instead. And what will happen in 13 minutes? Kim looked at her watch again. 12 minutes now. She lingered for a moment and then said in a reserved tone. We are retreating from the waking world, and no one should be able to follow us. So, in 12 minutes, the Dream Gate will shut down. Today is the deadline set for us by our boss. Which meant that they would be completely cut from the rest of humanity after passing through the gate. The only member of the Shadow Clan who could travel between the worlds freely was Revel herself. Jet sighed. Good thing I arrived on time, then. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly until, finally, it was time to leave. Just then, Jet heard an ominous sound coming from the shaft. It was the sound of countless wings beating as a swarm of crows flew down. Move, now! The wagons were pushed into the gate. The members of the Shadow Clan dove into its darkness, as well. Awakened Kim was the last one to pass the threshold. Jet did not want to have to kill her old mentor, so she rushed forward. What are you waiting for? Need a special invitation? The dreadful steed of the Lord of Shadows spared her a chilling look, then glanced at the shaft and snorted. Then, he followed Jet into the dark expanse of the Dream Gate. No sooner did they emerge on the other side than the black rift of the gate rippled, and disappeared without a trace. Jet let out a long sigh and leaned on the side of the monstrous horse, catching her breath. She could relax a little, since she had finally escaped the clutches of the Dreamspawn. Around her, the dark city of the Forgotten Shore basked in impenetrable darkness. 2830 over the hills and far away. Not long before that, Effie had a nice breakfast with her family. Little Ling was boasting about his studies, while her husband was listening to him quietly and chuckling from time to time. Oh, did you hear that, dear? Our son is interested in history now. Didn't you mention that you were fond of history too, when you were little? Ling stared at her thoughtfully. Huh, Mom was little once. Effie scoffed. Yeah, well, I couldn't really go anywhere when I was a kid, so I read everything I could get my hands on. I liked history too. Her husband took her hand. You hear that, rascal? Not only was your mom little once, but she was also a bookworm. Soon enough, the breakfast was over, and its warm atmosphere dissipated. Effie saw her husband off to the gates of their estate and kissed him goodbye. He had business to attend to in the city today, while she was supposed to depart for the castle after handing little Ling off to his tutor. Instead of hurrying back inside, however, Effie remained motionless for a while, looking at the street. Then, she sighed and turned away. Entering their home, she called Ling and sat him down in front of her. Hey there, Dumpling, were you excited for your lessons today? He hesitated for a few seconds, then asked instead of answering. What's wrong, Mom? Her smile faltered for a moment. Wrong, nothing is wrong, it's just that I want you to do something for me. Little Ling nodded. Of course, what is it? Effie pulled the black beast locket, which was hanging around her neck, out. You see, Uncle Sonny is away right now. So, Auntie Aiko is all alone in a huge castle. I was thinking that maybe you'll go keep her company for a bit. What do you think about that? Little Ling's ears ignited with enthusiasm. Really? Can I really go? Really? Effie nodded with a smile, then patted his head. Sure, Oh, and that castle. It's a bit scary, but actually, the castle is alive. It can even walk around. The boy's eyes widened. Wait, Uncle Sonny had such a cool castle this whole time, and he never even invited me once. Effie chuckled. Well, you can go take a look now. Little Ling raised his fists into the air. Yes, I can't wait to tell Dad. A subtle shadow ran across Effie's face. You can't tell Dad yet. Once Uncle Sonny is back, I'll come pick you up. You can report your findings to us then, like an explorer. Okay, Little Ling suddenly seemed unsure. What, we are leaving right now. What about Dad? What about my lessons? Instead of answering, Effie placed her hand on his shoulder. The locket hanging around her neck shimmered and collapsed into a rain of sparks, which then flowed like a torrent into Little Ling's chest. It's a bit dark where the castle is, so if you want to go somewhere sunny, just hop inside the beast farm. Okay, actually, why don't you go there right now? Take a walk and then nap a little. By the time you come out, you'll already be with Auntie Aiko. Little Ling seemed frozen in place. Mom, you gave me a memory. It's your locket, Mom. Effie patted him on the head. Take good care of it for me, all right. Sometime later, Ling was safely hidden inside the Black Beast locket. Picking it up from the floor, Effie sighed and then closed her eyes. The realm boundary parted in front of her, and she appeared in the waking world. Her absence would be noticed soon. In fact, she was willing to bet that the Dreamspawn was watching her every move. So, she could not be seen delivering the Black Beast locket to its destination. Instead, she glanced at her shadow and said quietly, "Come out." A moment later, two crimson flames ignited in the darkness, and an enormous black steed rose from it, looking at her with chilling intensity. Walking up to the tenebrous stallion, Effie untied the cord of the Black Beast locket and then tied it carefully around his neck. Bring him to the Forgotten Shore, to Aiko. Make sure that no one sees you. The black steed snorted in protest. I know that you were ordered to protect Bastion, Little Ling, and me. But I am telling you to do this instead. Sonny would have agreed if he were here, so go. The stallion stared at her for a few seconds, then briefly pressed his nose against her shoulder and dissolved into the shadows. Left alone, Effie sighed heavily and then reached for her tether. Nightmare was protecting Little Ling, so, it was up to her to protect Bastion and herself. I just hope that I am wrong. But soon enough, she learned that she hadn't been. Auntie Jet, we're leaving. Jet glanced up at the battlements of the dark castle. There, a boy was waving at her with a hint of sadness on his face. Only a hint, though, mostly, he seemed thrilled. The little rascal had been heartbroken when he learned that she would not be coming with them, but now, he looked quite happy. She waved back, wondering when she would see him again. If she would see him ever again. It had already been a few days since she arrived on the Forgotten Shore, and now, it was time to say farewell. Little Ling was going on an exciting adventure. Jet, meanwhile, was going to try and not succumb to her flaw. There was a rustle of wings, and Revel landed beside her, wearing her usual cold expression. Jet looked at the former Princess of Song, noting the Black Beast locket hanging around her neck. Look at you, Lightslayer. Taking toys from children. Revel glanced down at her and smiled darkly. Don't worry, Reaper, I'll be giving it right back. Jet lingered for a few seconds and then asked. So, how did it go? Revel shrugged nonchalantly and raised her arm, where the coils of a serpent tattoo were clearly visible. I still have my wits about me, if that's what you're asking. The prisoners have been delivered to the authorities, as well. She sighed. My career as a prison warden did not last long. Thank the dead gods. Now that the Forgotten Shore had become a shelter for the members of the Shadow Clan, keeping thousands of Asterian's thralls here did not seem like a good idea. The very reason why they had been captured, trying to slow down the spreading plague, was now meaningless, as well. So, Revel had carried them to the waking world in the Black Beast locket and released them. Their brief, but memorable imprisonment was over, just as inexplicably as it had started. Still, the thralls had seen the walls of the Dark City, which meant that Astarion knew that the forces of the Shadow Clan were present here. In order to be safe, Revel had decided to move the Dark Castle somewhere else. Jet raised an eyebrow. So, where are you going? Revel shrugged. The Forgotten Shore is vast. I think the Mimic will just have to be a wandering castle for a while. What about you, Reaper? Where are you going? She paused for a second and then asked. Are you sure you don't want to stay? Jet smiled faintly. It has nothing to do with what I want. Pretty soon, I'll need to kill something, and there's nothing to kill on the Forgotten Shore. She glanced west. So, I've been thinking of going west, into the frozen wastelands. Who knows, I might even come back alive. Jet glanced at Revel and grinned. Well, perhaps not quite. Ah, wait. You don't know. There was no one here she could joke about being dead with. Suddenly missing the Lord of Shadows, Jet patted Revel on the side and pointed to the dark castle. Godspeed, Lightslayer. Go, the little knave can't wait to ride a living castle. Revel studied her for a second before nodding. I'll have a feeling we won't see each other for a while. Don't go entirely feral out there, Reaper, take care. With that, she soared into the air and flew toward the walls of the dark castle. Soon enough, enormous legs extended from beneath the menacing fortress, and it began climbing down the slope of the steep hill. There was no giant moth sitting atop its main tower, but Jet still couldn't help but remember the dizzying assault on the Eternal City. How the hell is that thing going to climb over the wall? She was left alone in the darkness. Shaking her head, Jet turned away and headed in the opposite direction. Soul essence kept trickling from her broken core, and with it, life was slowly leaving her body. Jet walked through the dark city, which was quiet and empty. She ascended the wall and jumped down from it, turning into a torrent of mist just before landing. A few moments later, she assumed her human form again and regarded the boundless darkness ahead of her wistfully. Somewhere far away, the frozen wastelands were waiting to embrace her in their frigid embrace. Nobody knew where they led, and how far the hollow mountains extended into them. If she were lucky, she would return from the endless blizzard stronger and more powerful. If not, she would not return at all. Letting out a sigh, Jet took the first step. A torrent of ethereal sparks appeared above her shoulder, slowly forming into a black crow. The crow flapped its wings and opened its beak, cawing loudly. Dark, dark, Jet nodded. Yeah, you stupid bird. Hey, why don't you wish me some luck? Crow remained silent for a few seconds, and then opened its wings wide. Luck, luck,